Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. Thanks for checking out my previous videos. If you're new here, please subscribe. This time we are going to take the subframe from FrankenNova. We're going to disassemble the entire thing, wire brush it real good, get it cleaned up and painted, and then put some new control arm bushings and ball joints in it and get everything put back together to get it ready to go into the car. Let's get started. Been on here for a pretty long while. So. And I think when we hammered on that, we knocked the drum loose. Yeah, so. Okay, so normally I would take the shock out and I've got a spring compressor that goes inside the spring, and I can compress the spring, drop the control arm, and not have this issue. But since I can't get the shock out and I really don't have enough room to get under there, and okay, I really don't feel like grinding the heads of the nuts off, which is probably the best thing to do, and then just get the spring compressor in there. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to try to take the upper ball joint nut loose and see if I can get a little less excitement that way. Now, what's likely to happen whenever I hit this and knock that ball joint loose, if I leave this nut on here, I've got about a half a turn before that nut comes off the threads, so it's not holding on by much. There's a good chance the force is going to strip the nut off the end of the ball joint, and the lower control arm and spring and spindle is all going to slam into my floor and chip up the epoxy, which is already in bad shape. Worst case scenario, well, let's not talk worst case scenario. What's likely to happen, since it's not under a car, the whole subframe may jump up off the jack stands and fall down. So I'm going to have to be pretty careful and see how this goes. This is a terrible idea, by the way. Just don't do this stupid stuff. Kind of like that. All right. And you can see it almost jumped off my jack stand. Mainly that one, it spun the other jack stands. So it wasn't too bad, but that could be pretty dangerous. I wouldn't suggest it. Okay. I don't know if I'm better or worse, but what I'm going to do now is I'll just take the bolts out for the control arm bushings, the lower control arm bushings, and then have that end drop down and everything will be out of the way, and I'll be done with this crap. Okay, let's see. Here, and my control arm should just fall out, right? Ta-da! All right, let's see if this side's going to play nice. No, it's not. We're going to try this one different. I'm going to let it hit the floor from the top instead of the bottom, or whatever. Instead of leaving the nut on it like last time, I'm going to try it this way. I'm not worried about the threads of the ball joint, so I'm going to just whale away. Not come off the jack stands. Wow. And now it's bound up. Woo! There we go. That'll do it. All right, I finally got a stupid bolt out. So now this should just fall, right? Right? There we go. Okay, I got everything cleaned up around it. I'm gonna keep working. It's only 10:30 at night, so my neighbors won't care. All right, so we got the subframe tore apart last night. I went ahead and sat a little bit later, finished it up, and got it tore apart. And you saw how rusty and dirty and muddy it was. Before I brought it in here, I had just hit it with a small electric pressure washer real quick, knocked all the real big loose stuff off of it. And then I brought it in, disassembled it, and then this morning spent a couple of hours with a grinder with a wire brush attachment on it and a drill with a wire brush on it. And now I'm getting ready to paint it. And that's what we have. It's as clean as I'm gonna get it. Went over the whole thing. It's got some damage right here I'm not too worried about. It's got some really crappy factory welds. But you know, that's all these cars have, that. This big old chunk right there. But that's okay. Anyway, I'm gonna get the coat of paint on the bottom of it, and I'm using just some Rust-Oleum industrial paint with, I'm using semi-gloss. Yeah, gives it a nice kind of chassis black look. So anyway, I'm gonna hit the bottom of this, let it dry, and then I'll flip it over, and then I'll show you doing the top. Okay, I got the bottom of the subframe painted and flipped it over. It's mostly dry, throw it on the jack stands. Now we're gonna paint the top. And I've got this thing, like I said, I got it as clean as I'm gonna get it. I'm not worried about it getting any cleaner. I'm using Rust-Oleum industrial, and we're gonna put that on there. I got some help with it. We're gonna spray it real quick, and then we're gonna get started on the control arms. And here it is. Looks pretty good. It'll dry a lot less glossy than that. It'll kind of have a more of a satin look to it. And I like semi-gloss better than I like satin. Satin paint has too much gloss. Semi-gloss looks more like satin should. All right, now let's get to work on the control arms. All right, the frame turned out great. It took a long time to clean up all the crap off the floor, but should have cleaned it off outside, but it's cold. It's cold. So turned the heat on and did it in here. Made a big old mess. Got everything cleaned up. And last night I was trying to rebuild the lower control arms. I had the uppers already built, and after fighting with the ball joint for almost 2 hours, I gave up. So I'm going to put these on instead. Some CPP tubular control arms I've had laying around that used to be on that car. and I've got the stock springs that were also on that car. So we're going to put those on with the Right Stuff detail and brake kit and get this thing wrapped up. These things have got to get within about 6 inches of each other. Nope, no chance. And one of the problems is this stupid spring compressor's bolt sticking up so there, it won't let it go up all the way. Pissing me off. Okay, I've got this coil spring compressed as tight as I can get it. I hope this works. See how far we are. About 7.5, that's about right. From the top of the spindle to the bottom of the spindle where the ball joints hook up needs to be 7.5 or so inches. And if you don't get it about that close, what's going to happen is when you go to try to pull the ball joint into the spindle with the spring pressure on it, you're just going to spin the ball joint and you can't tighten it. So it's difficult to do. It's difficult to get a spring compressor that tight, at least with the one I've got. And my spring is not sitting in the pocket the way it needs to be because of the bow in the spring. Once I get it, once I get the thing taken apart, get the spring compressor off of it, you can, hopefully, I've done it before, turn this spring around until it sets in the pocket the way it's supposed to in the relief. Let's open up our disc brake kit and see what all we've got now that we're ready for a spindle. 3 boxes. I will put a link in the description to this exact kit. This is a power disc brake kit, Right Stuff detailing. I don't know the part number, but I'll put it in the description. Brake rod. That's my proportioning valve kit. Here's my mass cylinder and booster. It's going to look way nicer than the rest of the car, huh? All right. And I got the regular solid rotors instead of the drilled and slotted rotors. This is our backing plates. Got our Timken bearings, dust covers, and spindle nuts, rubber brake hoses, our caliper and pads. This is my caliper bracket. This is my spindles. Yep, this is my spindles. And I got the regular height kit. I did not get the drop spindle kit. Alright, and now in the bottom of the box are the bolts that used to be in that bag that was empty, and this is probably the ones to put my drum brake steering knuckles onto these spindles. Alright, that's it. Let's see if we can get a spindle put on this loaded spring over here. I do not know if this is going to work very well or not. Well, dang. It's not really showing that I've got, it's not showing any threads. bit showing. Now see, here's the problem I was talking about. I need to tighten this up some more and pull that up. And what's going to happen is the ball joint's probably going to start turning. And it won't let me do it, but we're going to try. So far it's letting me do it. Alright, I can't believe it went. See if I can tighten the lower now. Okay, now that the stupid coil springs are installed, I got my spindle covers off. I put my spindle gasket on. I'm going to put my caliper bracket behind the dust shield, slide that over, put my bolt in there. Now I don't have my steering arm ready just yet, fixed to go over there and get it. But I'm gonna put the bolt for the steering arm through the bracket like that. You've got these tabs on this bolt to bend over. Once you get that thing torqued down, I'll have to look at the torque specs. I'll get this torqued down, I'll get these tightened up with the steering knuckle on the back. I'm using the old drum steering arms. I'm using the ones off the drum brakes that says you can reuse them. Okay, so I realized I had not painted my spindles and they were just going to rust. So I went ahead and sprayed them, put my gasket on. My steering knuckle's dry enough to handle now without getting black paint all over my hands. And now, I'm going to put my caliper bracket. Caliper bracket goes behind the backing plate. And you have two different length bolts for the steering knuckle. One is longer, it's the one that goes through the caliper bracket into the spindle, and the shorter one just goes through the backing plate into the spindle. Now I'm going to take my steering knuckle, put it on the back. I can put my lock nuts, get them started. And now I can torque all that down. Okay, got the brackets, caliper bracket on. I've got my steering arm on. I actually got the cotter pins and the ball joint nuts. Got my steering arm and caliper bracket bolts bolted and tightened up. I got this bolt tightened up, and I got the lock tabs bent down on the bolt. Don't forget to do that. So now I am going to grease the bearings and install the rotors. Get my camera down. All right, comes with Timken bearings. I'm not sure if the last Right Stuff kit I bought came with Timken bearings or not, but this one did. Alright, so the way a lot of people pack bearings is they get a handful of grease and then they scoop the bearings in their hand. I've done it that way and I hate it. So I bought a bearing packer. If you don't have one of these, you need to have one of these. Especially if you're going to pack more than one bearing ever. And mine's got some trash in it. A bug or something? Oh, it's just dust. Okay. I was worried. No, it's a bug. I see legs. It was a bug. Okay. Now, first thing I'm going to do, take a little grease, rub it around the race, just because there'll be enough on there. That's probably not necessary, but it's just something I do. You take the bearing, set it in, take your pusher, if that's what it's really called, and you push down. And now you have a fully greased bearing. And you take your bearing seal, make sure you got it the right side up, set it on there, and get it just about flush. Take your small bearing for the front, do the same thing to it. You're not going to really get too much grease on it, so don't worry about that. All right. Get your spindle nut, get your index washer. I usually take the washer and put it on front so I can hold the bearing without getting grease all over me. Now slide it on. Get my nut started. And there is a factory torque spec for this nut. There's probably a preload. And somewhere there's probably a rotational inch-pounds torque setting to set a rotor to. I have no idea what it is, and I don't care to find out at the moment. So what I normally do is get it hand tight, put a wrench on there. You don't need anything near this big. Get it on there, make sure it doesn't have any play on it. And as long as I can spin it freely and my cotter pin lines up, I'm good to go. Now, I don't care if Mr. Goodwrench shows up at my house and tells me I'm doing it wrong. I'm not going to change the way I'm doing it. But I suggest you find out exactly what the torque specs are, how to torque that thing, and look it up. All right, this side is done. If the caliper paint is dry, we'll put it on real quick. All right, caliper's dry enough so I can start putting it on. Now, I'm sure this is somewhere in the instructions, but I've been doing this long enough to already know when you're putting calipers on and you have two of them laying there, always make sure that your bleeder is at the top of the caliper. If it's not, you've got the caliper for the other side. And then you will never get them bled. What'll happen is you'll try to figure it out, you'll try to bleed them, you try to bleed them, you try to bleed them, and then finally you'll call someone and get them over to help you bleed them, and they'll notice it and make you feel stupid. Ask me how I know that. All right, ready for hoses and all that stuff. Let's get to the other side and get it done. Okay, so now the subframe is painted, control arms and springs are in, disc brakes are on. The only thing left is shocks, which I don't have yet, and I'm not going to put a sway bar on it. So now it's time to do the steering. I took the original steering box and pitman arm and center link and cleaned all that up and painted it, made it look kind of pretty. And then I went out and I bought some Pro Forged inner and outer tie rod ends, and then I Mevotech or something adjusting sleeves. I'll put a link in the description of the video to all the parts, the disc brake kit, the tie rod ends, and even the bearing greasers that I used earlier. Let's get started on getting the steering box and center link, and an end's installed. Okay, when you've got the steering box and you don't have the hoses in it and it's full of fluid, if you move the pitman arm, it squirts fluid out, so be aware of that. I'm going to try to get it up here without moving it and squirting any fluid out. Did I mention it was heavy? Uh-oh. There we go. Now I got to clean that up and paint those. Okay, got my inner tie rod ends, I got my outer tie rod ends. Everything is Pro Forged except for the inner tie rod ends. They're on the way. I went down to my local Advance and got these just so I could get this thing put together and get this video done. When you're doing this, go ahead and get your clamps on. Your inner tie rod end has left-hand threads on it. It's only going to go into one end of the sleeve, and that's not the end. It'll go into the other end of the sleeve, and you spin it backwards to get it going in. And what I like to do is I like to get my, when I take my old ones off, I take them off the outer and inner all together as an assembly when I can. In this case I did. And then I try to get one of my old ones, I lay it down and try to get my new ones to about the same length, so that I know that I'm getting a good starting point where it's not going to be crazy out of whack. There we go. That's pretty close. All right, got that all buttoned up. Everything looking good. So that ended up as a pretty long video. I put a little more detail in that one. If you want more detail or less detail, leave me something down in the comments. Let me know how you feel about it. I can do more detail, not a whole lot more, but a little bit more, and I can do less detail if you just want to see the basics of what I do instead of, you know, how to do it. So I'm not big on how to do much as I am this is what I'm doing kind of thing. So I tried to go into a little more detail on some of that stuff because I know a lot of guys ask those questions on some of the forums and stuff like that. So, you know, shoot me a question if you got one. Check out my previous builds, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.